Zaccai Curtis is a pianist, composer, and teacher who's played with artists like Christian Scott, Eddie Palmieri, and Sidney Blackman Santana. He teaches at the University of Hartford's Hart School and West Con. He's also written two books to help students learn about jazz and Latin jazz. And he leads his own group, the Zaccai Curtis Quartet. And he co-founded a record label, TRR Collective, with his brother Luquez. He's also produced the Grammy-nominated album Entre Colegas and created the Riff Music News app. And most recently, something very exciting, a winner of the Grammy for Best Latin Jazz Album. So, Zakai, thanks so much for taking the time today. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Abe.
My pleasure. I want to backtrack for a second. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and we come across artists in a variety of ways, whether we go to see them, someone tells us about them. But I came across you from your work with the late great Ralph Peterson. You and your brother played with him for a long time.
Right, right. Yeah, Ralph was one of our early mentors. We started playing with Ralph 2005. Luke has a little earlier, but we were doing gigs around anywhere from New York, New Jersey, Boston, and that was my first trio gig. And I learned how to play trio with Ralph, although it wasn't necessarily piano trio. He might call it a drum trio, but it was an incredible school to be involved in. And Ralph Peterson is just one of the most amazing musical minds there has ever been. So
The three of you work so well together. How did you guys meet? How did you and your brother meet Ralph?
Luquez met him in Berkeley. Luquez went to Berkeley, and Luquez was in his ensemble, and he started to play with Ralph in Ralph's, uh, I think his septet, and then septet or sextet. And so I was I was a big fan. So I knew Ralph's music was extremely special. Luquez introduced me to Ralph's music, although we had records with Ralph already playing on it. So I knew he was, but his records I was introduced to Luquez, and they were extremely complicated, far beyond the level I would be at, and just listened to a lot of his music. Luquez then said, "Why don't you come to the school and meet Ralph?" And so I went to the school one day, and I went to Ralph's studio. Luquez was there. I think they were having some sort of lesson or session, and he just points to the piano. And that was the first time I got to play with Ralph, and the rest is history. What he ended up doing after that is we got a couple gigs with Ralph, and I asked Ralph to play on my graduating recital, my master's recital. And he said, yeah, I was surprised. He said yes. And so actually my recital was amazing. It had Ralph Peterson, Andy Gonzalez, Roland Guerrero on percussion, and me and Luquez. And it was just an incredible recital. I think it's on camera somewhere, but that was so amazing. And every single time I played with Ralph, I came away with something new that I had to practice.
You remember the last time you played with him?
Yeah, definitely. That was the last time I played with Ralph was the recording session, his last recording session, which was Raise Up Off Me.
So you went into the studio with him, and God rest his soul. He was such a special musician, and I'm sure you take those experiences, having studied with him. Can you see yourself? I mean, see him and you, and when you teach now, you know what I mean? Like you see some of the things he taught you when you're mentoring.
Yeah, Ralph was all about legacy. He had a big thing for that. He knew so much music, he knew so much about people, and he was very loyal too. So we all had this kind of like respect for the same musicians, for the same music. And Ralph was, at this point, leading a lot of young musicians, similar to how Art Blakey was. And, in terms of what we try to do is, me and lots of other musicians that have either studied with Ralph, had contact with Ralph or looked up to him, been in his ensembles, take away so much from what he offered. And I have to say, I hope one day to be able to do that with a lot of young musicians the way he did. But it was very special, and he also knew how to inspire. That was one of the things I learned from him right away. I'd never hear him say anything bad about like a student, no matter the caliber or level the student was at. I remember one of his go-to lines. I always, the student that I would look at Ralph to see how would he react to that student, and a lot of times his reaction was, "He'll get it if he wants it. He'll get it." And I always took that as such an amazing response, and I adopted that, of course. And I saw what it does to young students, and you can see, the development with just encouragement alone. And you'll see that he really knew how to make you feel special as a young person just studying this music.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, and the fact that you've taken, that approach into your education now is, it's something not to be overlooked, because, when we have mentors, they can, it could be also a negative thing. They can be hard on us, but your experience was positive. I know, I'm sure people have been talking your ear off about the Grammy win. So I'd like to, I'd like to ask you, a couple things about that. Hopefully you haven't been asked these questions before, if that's okay. You know, was there a moment, during, the journey when you believed a Grammy win was possible, in a sense, like before everything happens?
No,
Like, did you ever think that you're going to
no,
be?
no. I went, and this is the truth. I went into, I was filming when I was sitting in the theater. I was filming the screen so that I could send it to the winner. And it didn't register when they said Kubop lives, actually. And that was, I all the way up to that point. And it was a little strange. The the musicians in my band, they held strong with the belief. We're like, okay, we could win this. And I was kind of like the one that was like, yeah, it's not really possible. I was like, I don't know I don't know what you're thinking or what's going through your mind, but that's not really possible. um and to me, that the Grammy nomination was such an amazing, I would say it was an amazing experience, because I felt that a lot of people heard what we did and they appreciated what we did, and I respected that so much. But I didn't have anything in terms of a Grammy win in my mind. Um, but it's amazing, and in terms of like having like music like kubop, which is a style of music that fuses Cuban music and bebop together, to have some sort of recognition, and it is really inspiring, um, and it makes me feel like I really have to work to, you know I would say, push myself as hard as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, now that you have this win, I mean, it's like, you do you feel more freedom musically, like to experiment, or it's like, does this add pressure now to meet new expectations? You know what I mean? Like,
Pressure, total pressure in the best way. I've always pressured myself, but I never felt, um, I've always pressured myself, but as if no one's watching and no one's listening. And this is interesting. This is a little bit of a different type of pressure. And I called my mentor, Eddie Palmieri, and he actually put it into perspective for me. And that was a well needed perspective. Um, and, the musicians in the band, they are truly the best of the best. So Lakecia Curtis, Camila Molina, Reynaldo de Jesus, Willie Martinez. And I'm so glad that they're able to get that recognition. There's no musicians like them on the planet, and they worked really hard on this record. And I had mentioned this one time. The record was really a snapshot, and that was a concept that I also got from Ralph. So that snapshot, he talks about records being a snapshot in time. Um, they're not the work. That's just a snapshot, a small amount. About 7 or 8 years, I'm conservatively thinking, but about 7 or 8 years before that, we've been working on this style in this music and really working on the style in the music. Trying to capture what Noro put out, Noro Morales, Tito Puente, and then also going into the bebop side of things with the form of the music. So it's really difficult to get musicians that understand all the aspects,
It's
both sides.
complex. It's very
Yeah.
complex.
And so 7 years later, we, go into the studio and that this album was what comes out. And the album was very like we didn't tailor it as much as you would an album that maybe you bring in songs into the studio and you work them out in the studio. They had already been worked out throughout those years. So it was truly a snapshot of what we've been working on for 7, 8 years straight.
Um, it's you say it's a snapshot as if people, if almost like you want them to be able to see everything that's before and all the work that went into it, but it's you got to document it somehow, right?
Right. That's right. That's absolutely
Uh,
right. It reminds me also like the process thinking back on it reminds me of how a lot of musicians used to talk about how they would go on tour and then come back from a tour and then record the record or record the music, which is the opposite of what I'm used to, or a lot of musicians are used to, where we have to make a record first and then use that record to then book performances and tours.
yeah, the last thing I wanted to ask you, if that's okay, about, you know, um, what do you think the biggest misconception people have, about what it means to be a Grammy winner? I was talking to Dan, Dan Pugach, the drummer.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we were talking about it, and he said, it's not like, once you get a Grammy, it's like, it's like now everything is here and you can do whatever the hell you want. Um, is it a milestone? I mean,
Yeah,
you
it
think it'll help you with, get more of the experiences you want? Like, how do you see it in terms of misconceptions people might have about it? Because people are very curious.
yeah it's a it's your peers end up choosing the Grammy winners. Not necessarily fans, so it's your peers, and that means something on many different levels. Um, and what people may not understand is, we all still work. We still got to. I still got to go to Hart.
Yeah,
That next day,
yeah,
I
totally.
had to go to Hart, and I think my students are like, "You're coming in?" I was like, "Of course." I mean, Grammy doesn't come with a check, but
Yeah,
that's that's the idea. Is that it's an accolade that really you know picks out some of the musicians that have been working hard all year round, and it's a chance to celebrate them. So it's very important in that way. But at the same time, you still got to practice. You still have to work. You still have to, do everything that every musician also has to do, and every artist has to do.
yeah. I
And I don't.
I hope these questions were, I'm sure a
Yeah,
million people have been asking you about them. I hope there were new thoughts for you to have.
yeah, yeah. I haven't answered any of those questions.
Beautiful. I want to backtrack a little bit if that's okay. And we're kind of moving around, but that's fine. I want to talk to you about what it was like. Two things. I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with your brother. When you have, I mean, it's such a special thing. Two like great players. Like, what was it? Were you guys just playing together all the time growing up? Like, how like if you could backtrack, like, what was it like?
Yeah, yeah, we did. We played in a lot of music programs. We grew up. He was playing jazz before I was. And then we would play in the Artist Collective, the Greater Hartford Academy, all these bands for young kids. We were playing together. Of course, it was a lot of button heads. It's your brothers. It's about a
Yeah,
year
I
and a
know.
half difference. I mean, just like you'd play outside and have arguments, we did the same thing when we were playing music. Um, but you learn in the same process. You learn in the same way from the same teachers, pretty much. So a lot of the same material you share, and that's a good thing.
Did it ever feel
Musically,
like
musically.
because he started earlier into jazz that you almost like was there ever a point of like, oh, like like I need to catch up or something, or was it more like you know, no, we're just on this together? Anything like that?
Um, Honestly, Luquez is much further along than a lot of people, not just myself, musically. I think that's recognized in the music community. Um, and he's always been like that when he was young, and then when he got older. So a lot of times the things that I would have to practice for, he didn't necessarily have to practice for.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to talk to him too, if on another note, if you could, I'd love to speak to him as well.
Yeah,
That's someone I'd love to
yeah.
speak.
He's on a few different he's in a few different bands that tour a lot. You got to catch him. You got to catch him when he's in town.
Yeah. No,
Very busy.
but you start playing, and you and your brother, he's a little bit further along than you, as you were saying. What was it specifically that, made you want to really go after playing this music? I mean, being an improviser, jazz, like what was it originally that kind of sparked it? Do you remember?
It wasn't so I'm a little bit I'm a little bit different in that way. I didn't I was kind of just going through the motions, wasn't really concerned about, some sort of, oh, I'm going to play music for a living. I just did it. I just played. And a lot of other musicians the same way. But at the time, I was playing classical music. I was doing classical music, and at whatever I was in some sort of jazz programs outside of the school, but I didn't really take it seriously. I was studying classical music, and I think at the Greater Hartford Academy they needed another piano for the jazz band, another pianist. So that's when I started playing. It wasn't a hard choice. I just said, okay, I'm playing piano. I like playing piano. So I ended up doing the jazz band, and that's really where I became more serious and learning things. And I really like to do things like transcribe and theoretical theory. I was really into that.
So it was like you were
Um,
playing in the jazz band, and then like you'd go home and on your own you would do the research to, the greats kind of.
it didn't stop. We went to, even when I was in middle school, I was at the give you an example. I was at the Artist Collective in Hartford, which was Jackie McLean's school for young musicians, and I was in the classical program there. And then I also played. Um, I played in the big band, the jazz big band. Then I also went to the Hartford Conservatory. They had a jazz. My dad would put us in all the programs, every program. It didn't matter the style of music. That's how we
That's
got into Latin
awesome.
jazz. So they had a Latin jazz program. So my dad threw us in there. It was free. So that was kind of the starting. Hartford at that time had incredible programs. Incredible teachers were there. So, we were lucky. But that was my beginning, was just being in these programs, and then eventually, studying music seriously after a while.
Man, I auditioned to go to the Hart School when I was 17. I got in. It's like some part of me wishes I almost went there.
Yeah,
Just
where did
so
you end
much.
up going?
I went to Berkeley, and
Oh, nice, 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 nice. That's fun.
Berkeley's great, but I mean, it was in retrospect that could have been another beautiful thing, if I look back on it. But
Yeah, yeah. I went to Boston as well. And also part of me thinks about that. Like, what if I went to Hart and stayed home? My older brother did that. All my friends went to Hart as well. I have so much friend. That's a good thing. Is I have the friends from Boston and the friends from Hartford.
Hartford's got a great scene, and
Yeah.
you're kind of in this between New England and New York, and being able to navigate that. I mean, it's also kind of, does it ever feel like you're in these like different worlds, music, you know what I mean, like geographically, but they're all so close to each other.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I'm always, sometimes I'm in New York twice a week. Boston, I'm not. I don't go to Boston too often. I used to, but not anymore. So it just feels. It does feel like just an extension of just the music world altogether, and I just play wherever.
Yeah. So what's on the agenda now, like for coming up in the upcoming months or the rest of the year, that you're really looking forward to musically?
Yeah. The performances. I'm looking forward to playing with these guys. We have some stuff coming up. I think we have something at Pregones Theater in New York, and there's a few others I want to make announcements of, and I'll probably make announcements on my website, just because I just want to make sure all the details are straight and who's playing on what. But the performances should be a lot of fun coming up. I'm really looking forward to that.
So, is it mostly be in theaters like that?
Right now, yeah, but festivals, theaters, we're trying to get some of the clubs involved. I know one of our main places that we've been playing all the time at is the Side Door, which is in Old Lyme, Connecticut. That's like one of my favorite clubs. So we'll probably be talking to them shortly. And I mean, anywhere really, but that's kind of the vibe right now is
You'll
to get
play
the
in the clubs,
performances rolling.
theaters, like do it all basically.
Right, right.
That's you do you is it still like I don't know, there's something special about playing at a jazz club though, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's some of the jazz clubs are some of the most fun places to play at, and um,
The vibe.
the vibe, the people that are there running it, they really love it. I mean, they could be doing other things. That's another thing. If you own a jazz club, I really tip my hat to you because you could just turn that jazz club and have an R&B, weekend and make a ton more money. So I really appreciate these jazz club owners that, are really making this happen, keeping the culture alive. So
The Side Door, was that is that your favorite club to play in, you think? Or
yeah,
was
it's
that
one of my favorite because I've known Ken since I was a young kid. Ken is the one that owns the club, and it's like I have family around. Family always shows up when I'm there. I have family in New London, um, and I also have family in New Haven too. But family in New London is not too far away from where Old Lyme is, and so we always like to hang out there. It's just a great vibe. They treat the musicians really well, so it's yeah. I like the environments that the clubs bring.
I was driving home from Newport in Rhode Island to New Jersey, and me and my wife drove past. I'm like, oh, that's that famous jazz club right there.
Yeah. Yep.
People
Yep.
could no, I'm
Yeah.
saying like people could see it. It's like, it's in that sense. It's really,
Yeah.
really cool. No, this has been awesome. I really appreciate, you taking the time to speak with me today. And you know, and I really appreciate the things you said about Ralph and stuff too. I just I'm that was some beautiful stuff. And just one more quick thing, if one more thing I'd like to ask you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Definitely.
um, you've worked with so many great people. Who do you want to collaborate with that maybe you just like who's on the top of your list in the jazz world that maybe you just haven't crossed paths with yet, or just, you know, hard to reach, something like that? I mean, that might not be the case, but who do you really want to play with? Like, who you feel like what do you have a strong connection with musically?
Um, there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, first I'll got to shout out, the people that I dedicated the record to, which is Donald Harrison and Eddie Palmieri, and I still work with them musically as well.
Amazing. They're amazing.
So I feel like there's an aspect to that, and so much more music that can be explored, with those great musicians. There's a lot of young musicians that I listen to that I think are incredible, and people like Emmanuel Wilkins and a lot of other people of his caliber and his age that would be great to work with. I'm looking forward to doing something with my brother Keon Harold and his brother Emmanuel, and then also my brother Lucas. We've been
Oh yeah.
talking about this for years to do a brothers project, so we might be putting that into motion very soon.
Oh, that'll be
Um,
killing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of other great players that for me, I don't really see a player that I don't want to collaborate or play with.
I love that.
That's the thing, and just like people ask me the same thing about pianists, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard a piano player that I didn't like. I mean, it's really hard, but there's a lot of musicians out there doing some great work. A lot of musicians doing a lot of great work in the Latin jazz community that we look up to, and a lot of young people doing it. So we respect that. I'm talking about the entire group and the entire community. Really, it's an important aspect of the music to keep that. The African rhythms that stay alive through the Cuban music is something that's extremely important to keep, I guess, in your knowledge base.
I just love
That,
how you
that's
said like there isn't anyone I don't want to play with because like now that I'm thinking like this put that thought in my head, for me personally I'm like I want to play with everybody, either I'm going to be pushed or I'm going to be the ones pushing them, so it's
yeah. I'm not lying,
no
but
thanks
yeah,
so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and wish you a wonderful 2025.
thank you so much. I appreciate it, Abe. Thanks for talking to me.